Hey everyone, thank you for coming to check out another After Effects reproduction in Apple Motion 5. So this is our 11th run, our 11th reproduction, and the source graphic this week comes from the same as last week. It's the motion designer David Roberts. There's a link in the description if you want to go and check it out. That's an After Effects titles promotion, and you'll see this source graphic come in at about 12 minutes and 50 seconds. If you do check it out, I think you'll see that this time we got really close to the look and feel. So what are we going to build? We've got this frame that will animate in with a blue over white detail, and the main titles will come in and they're going to be framed by this banner which is dropping down to give us the cut out stenciled typography there. Then that banner is going to drop again, giving us the double type effect there, and the lower title is going to come in and be framed, and then everything is going to animate out. So over in the layers panel, hey, there's our clone layer that's going to animate everything out for us, and here in the main graphic, it's a really simple build. We've got the frame, and then if you've been following along before with other reproductions, this is really familiar. It's our follow and lead build, which is our go-to build whenever we have this dual text effect like we're getting here. Hey, I have to give a big shout to Benjamin Gibb, who gave me some really good advice about when I screen record my screen resolution, so I've adjusted everything. So hopefully the UI and all the details should be much clearer for you. And if you want to get your hands on this font, it's the Nimbus Sans, and I've put a link in the description so you can go to a website and get a free copy. Right then, let's jump into the project and see how it all comes together. The project is 1920 by 1080, it's 30 frames a second, and this project is 7 seconds long. But you're only going to need 6 seconds of that in the timeline. I have this background to start with. It's just a gradient generator sitting in its own group. It's a diagonal gradient from almost black to grey, and it's just trying to keep a similar color profile to the source graphic. So the first step is to add 3 new groups to the project. I'll name the top group here follow and the next group lead. So in these 2 groups we will do all the titles and the banner. But this bottom group here, I'll name that frame, and we'll put our frame in there. So with that bottom group selected, I'll grab the rectangle tool, and around about the middle of the canvas I'll just drag out a rectangle. In the inspector, turn the fill off, leave the outline on, set that outline color to white, set the width to 12, set the joint to square. The start cap and end cap can stay put, set to round. I'll just come into the layers panel here and rename this shape as white. Then I'll come back into the inspector, into the geometry section, open up the size options, and I'll give it a width of 600, a height of 190, and I'll come into properties and reset the X and Y position to center it on the canvas. So now to animate the shape, we are going to work with the last point offset and first point offset here, but we want them to start from around about here. So to do that, we're going to select the white shape, right click it, choose convert to points, and I'm just going to use a guide for the next step. So if you want to use a guide, you need your rulers on, so just come into the view menu, set rulers on, and make sure guides are set to on as well. I'll drag a guide out to the middle, to the 0 mark there, and I'll just zoom in so I can see. And we converted this shape to points, so it's set now then to edit points. after doing that unless you change it. And I'm going to double click on the path to add a point, and I'll right click on that and choose set start point. So I'll just shift Z to resize the canvas and get rid of this guide. Now you see when I adjust the last point and the first point offset, they're all based from that point there. And so now we can start to animate this in. Make sure your playhead is at the start. Set a keyframe for the first point offset and the last point offset and set them to 50%. And then bring your playhead to 1 second or 30 frames. And bring the first point offset to 0 and the last point offset to 100%. So now over 1 second the frame will animate in. But we want to adjust these curves to get a nicer looking effect. Now, as I mentioned before, I've adjusted the screen resolution to make things clearer, but what I'm finding is that it has a strange effect on the curves here. So when I edit these curves, you might see the handles go all over the place. But I'm going to drag to select both curves and right click to set the interpolation to Bezier. So now I have access to the handles, and I'm going to break tangent on each handle. And I'll start with these two here. So adjusting these influences the beginning of the animation. So I'm going to pull them forward. Yeah, and they get very finicky. I've noticed that the screen resolution's been adjusted. And then I'm going to grab these handles and move them back. I might just do them individually. So this should give us an animation that begins slowly, speeds up, and then settles finally. Right, I'm going to adjust these back even more to really exaggerate that acceleration in the middle of the animation. Oh, I got away with it that time. Right, that's the kind of look that we want. And I've mentioned before that when I'm working with the curves, I'm still not very good at it, and I could spend too long here perfecting it, which would just bore you to tears. So what we have here, that's the general idea of what the After Effects animation does. If you do go and grab a look at the source graphic at the link that I provided, you can then, when the project is done, you can work on these curves to get them looking closer and closer to the source graphic. Okay, so our animation is working fine there. What we want now is we want that second blue frame to come in over the top. So with the white frame selected in the layers panel, I'm going to Command D to duplicate it and rename it as blue. And I'll come into the inspector and change the color to blue. And I'm going to bring my playhead to 3 frames and making sure that that new shape is still selected. I'm going to use the shift left bracket combination on my keyboard to shift the in point forward 3 frames. So now the blue rectangle frame begins 3 frames later than the white one, so we get it coming in and riding in over the top. But we want it to finish in 1 second, so I'm going to bring my playhead to 1 second, and I'm looking at the blue frame here in the timeline. I'm just going to grab that keyframe point and pull it back to the 1 second mark. So what we've done is basically shortened the blue frame animation to 27 frames. So now we get this. So that's the first step finished, and the next step will be to put the banner in for the main titles. The banner for our titles is going to be in here in our lead group. So I'll select the lead group, I'll grab the line tool, and somewhere in the middle of our frame I'm going to just hold shift and draw from the top down to put a straight line inside of our rectangle frame. I'll just come into the inspector and rename it as lead stencil. Just close up the frame group. So I'll come into the inspector, into the styles panel, and first of all I'll give it the same color as the frame. Going to give it a width of 580. And I'll come into properties and just set the X position to 0. The Y position we'll do by eye. I'll come back into the shape styles. The joint we don't have to worry about. I'm going to turn off the start cap and the end cap. Just set them both to none. So just in keeping with the After Effects source graphic, I'm going to just increase the space here a little bit. So I'll come into the geometry section, and I think I'll set them both to 82, and this one here to minus 82. Alright, and now grab the Y position and set that. How is it going to feel if I set that to 0? Alright, perfect. So X and Y position set to 0, and we have this banner now sitting directly in the center of our frame. So we want this banner to start at 10 frames, so bring your playhead to 10 frames, and with the banner shape selected, hit I on your keyboard to trim it to there, and now we can start to animate it. So come into the shape style section, bring the last point offset to 0 and set a keyframe. And then we want to come to 1 second and 5 frames and set that last point offset to 100%. And now we want to adjust this curve, so I'm going to drag to select them, set the interpolation to Bezier, break the tangents, and I'm going to pull this handle all the way this way. That'll do. So we want this element here to hold still for 5 frames and then animate down more. So I'll bring my playhead to 1 second and 10 frames. And now I'm going to set a keyframe for the first point offset. And then bring the playhead forward 15 frames to 1 second 25 frames. And I'm going to set the first point offset now to 60%. And I'm going to adjust this curve. I just used the tool fit curves to fit visible curves to window, and then I'll come here and reduce the timeline. Well, the idea was to give me a taller curve to work with, but it doesn't quite work that way. Anyway, I'll set the interpolation to Bezier, up, break the tangent on the handle. And we want the curve to look something like this. Even a little bit faster. So with this curve shape, it accelerates in the beginning and then settles slowly. So now we've just got to add the main titles for our next step. The main titles are going to go in the lead group. So I've got the lead group selected. I'll grab the text tool and I'm going to type in motion titles. And I'm going to set the font to Nimbus Sans. And as I mentioned before, if you don't have this font, there's a link in the description. You can go to a website there from the link and get a free copy. We want the font size to be 110. I'm going to center the alignment and reset the X and Y position. I'll bring my playhead to 20 frames and use the I hotkey on my keyboard to trim this text element to start there. I'm also going to come in to the inspector and increase tracking to 5%. And I want the Y position at -5. So now let's animate these titles. With the playhead at 1 second 10 frames and the Y position at -5, set a keyframe there on the Y position and then bring the playhead back to 20 frames and set the Y position to -160. And now I'm going to adjust this curve. Break the tangent on these handles, and I want these titles to rush in and then settle. And a curve that looks like this will give us that effect. Okay, good. So we've got our titles in place, and our next step then is to start with the masking. So these titles here are going to give us the stenciled, the cut out look. So to do that, I'm going to select the banner shape, right click, add an image mask, and use our main titles text as the source, and then set the blend mode to subtract. So the next step then, as the banner shape drops down to 60% from the first point offset, we want to have the second text effect coming in there. So I'm going to duplicate our main titles and drag them into the follow group. I'm going to bring the playhead to 1 second and 10 frames and use I on the keyboard to trim them to that point and turn them on. I'll come into the properties and leave that as it is. Then I'm going to come into the lead group. I'll grab our lead stencil banner shape. I'll duplicate that and drag that into the follow group and delete the image mask. Just rename this shape to follow. And likewise, we want to trim this shape to 1 second and 10 frames. So I'll move my playhead there and hit I on the keyboard. So I'm going to reset the parameters here, and for the first point offset, I'm going to set a link behavior and choose the lead stencil shape as the source. Come into compatible parameters, choose object, shape, outline, first point offset. So the last step here to finish off the masking is to grab the follow group, right click, add image mask, and drag in that follow shape as the source, and then set the blend mode to subtract. Okay, so now we're all set to add the lower title line. The lower titles will go in the lead group, so I'll grab that group in the layers panel and grab the text tool and enter in the text, this lower title line. And I'll come to the inspector, I'll center the alignment, I'll reset the X position to 0, and the Y position I'm going to put at -113, and then bring the playhead to 1 second and 10 frames. I'll set a keyframe there for the Y position, and I'll use the I key on my keyboard to trim the text element to that position. I'll come into the inspector, and in the text panel I'll set the tracking to 38. So the titles are going to animate up over 15 frames. So I'll bring the playhead to 1 second 25 frames and come into the properties, set the Y position at -65. Now I'll come in and play with this curve. I'll break the tangents, and I want these titles to rush up at the beginning of their movement and then settle into place. So this curve will give us that effect. I want them even to be a little bit faster. I want them just settling into place around about exactly the same time as this first point offset reaches 60%, so a bit faster. Okay, so that will do. Now we want the lower title line to be cut into the banner, so we're going to add another image mask to the lead banner shape here. I'll right click on that, select add image mask, and then add this lower title line as the source, and then choose subtract. So that's the titles finished, and now we want the graphic to animate out. So the whole animation finishes at 1 second 25, and then we want everything to be still until 3 seconds. So I'll bring my playhead to the 3 second mark, and I'm going to add a new group. I'll call this group animate in, and I'll close up all the other groups except for the background. I'll select the frame and lead and follow group and drag them into the animate in group, and with the animate in group selected, I'm going to hit the O key on my keyboard to trim everything in that group to 3 seconds. Then I'm going to right click on that group and choose make clone layer, and I'm going to hold shift and left bracket on my keyboard to shift the clone layer in point to 3 seconds, and in the inspector, in the timing panel, if the timing panel options aren't open, just click around here where it should say show to open them up and set the clone layer to reverse. So here, there is this, our animation finishes at 1 second 25, and so there's a 5 frames and 1 second wait until 3 seconds. So before the clone layer animates out, it's going to sit still for exactly the same number of frames before animating out. So then the whole effect is finished over 6 seconds. And there we go. So from here I could turn on, I'll definitely turn on the motion blur settings before I render it out. Thanks for joining us for another After Effects graphic reproduction in Apple Motion. I hope that this is useful for you with your titles for your motion projects and your Final Cut projects. Thanks for watching.